When two minds share the same delusion, the disturbing phenomenon of folie à deux, what if I told you it's possible for two people to share exactly the same delusion, that two completely separate minds can dive together into an alternative reality so convincing that even medicine can't fully explain it? Imagine sitting in a psychiatric hospital room. The air carries that characteristic smell of disinfectant mixed with something indefinable, almost metallic. Fluorescent lights buzz softly above your head. From the corridor, you hear muffled footsteps and the occasional creak of a door closing. It's in this environment that doctors encounter one of psychiatry's most disturbing phenomena. Two people who have not only lost contact with reality, but lost it together, creating a parallel world that only they can see. In 1984 in France, two 35-year-old twin brothers were admitted to the hospital on the same day, not by accident or coincidence. They arrived at the hospital convinced that French government agents had implanted listening devices in their homes and had been monitoring their every move for months. The details were identical, meticulous, impossible to be mere coincidence. Both described the same nighttime noises, the same suspicious cars parked on the street, even the same specific agent who supposedly coordinated the surveillance. The most frightening part: they had lived in different cities for more than 10 years. This case, documented in the European Archives of Psychiatry and Clinical Neuroscience, represents a classic example of what the French called folie à deux, literally madness of two. But the English term that best captures the essence is shared psychotic disorder. The first official medical description of this phenomenon dates to 1877, when French psychiatrists Charles Lasègue and Jean-Pierre Falret observed something that left them deeply disturbed. They noticed that in some families, especially among very close people, delusions not only arose simultaneously, but fed off each other, growing and becoming more complex, like a poisonous plant that finds fertile soil. Think about your closest relationship. Maybe a sibling, a spouse, a best friend. You probably share inside jokes, references that no one else understands, even similar ways of seeing the world. Now imagine that this deep connection, this mental attunement, takes a dark turn. Imagine that, instead of sharing joys and positive experiences, you begin to share fears, paranoia, and distorted visions of reality. This is exactly what happens in folie à deux. Usually, one person develops psychotic symptoms first. This is called the primary inducer. It could be schizophrenia, delusional disorder, or acute psychotic episode. The second person, called the secondary recipient, initially resists their partner's strange ideas, but something mysterious happens. Slowly, gradually, they begin to accept, then believe, and finally live the same distorted reality. The process is like watching someone being hypnotized in slow motion. First comes hesitant doubt. Aren't you imagining things? Then, cautious consideration. Well, now that you mention it, I noticed something strange too. Next, gradual acceptance. You're right, they really are watching us. And finally, complete immersion. How didn't we notice before? The signs were all there. But who are these people that fall into this shared mental spiral? Studies show a frighteningly consistent pattern. Usually, they are people living in social isolation, frequently close family members or couples who spend most of their time together. Women seem to be more susceptible than men, in a ratio of approximately 3-to-1, although researchers still debate whether this reflects real biological vulnerability or just differences in how men and women express psychiatric symptoms. Age also matters. Folie à deux is more common in people over 40, especially those facing significant stress, job loss, grief, chronic illness, pandemic-related isolation. It's as if the mind, already weakened by life's pressures, finds in the delusional connection with another person a desperate way to make sense of internal chaos. In 1993, a case documented in the American Journal of Psychiatry described two elderly sisters, aged 67 and 69, who had lived together since their respective husbands' deaths. Both developed the absolute conviction that their neighbors were pumping toxic gases through the walls to slowly poison the entire neighborhood. They bought gas masks, sealed windows with plastic, and contacted environmental authorities multiple times. The most disturbing aspect wasn't just the extreme precautions they took, but how their stories fit together perfectly. One described in detail the equipment the neighbor supposedly used during the early morning hours. The other complemented with precise descriptions of times and types of gases. Together, they had constructed a narrative so cohesive and detailed that they initially managed to convince even some healthcare professionals that there might be some truth behind their concerns. When investigators finally examined the neighbor's house, they found absolutely nothing, no chemical equipment, no evidence of any suspicious activity. But for the sisters, this only confirmed how sophisticated the operation against them was. Modern neuroscience has begun to offer some clues about how this phenomenon might occur. Neuroimaging studies show that people in psychotic episodes present altered activity in specific brain areas, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for what we call reality testing. It's as if the natural filter that helps us distinguish between internal thoughts and external perceptions begins to fail. But this explains only part of the puzzle. How can two people synchronize their reality distortions so precisely? Some researchers suggest the answer lies in mirror neurons, brain cells that activate both when we perform an action and when we observe another person performing the same action. These neurons are fundamental for empathy and social understanding. Imagine that these mirror neurons, in a person already psychologically vulnerable, begin to reflect not just observable behaviors, but also distorted mental processes. It's a theory still in development, but offers a fascinating explanation for how delusions can literally jump from one mind to another. Treatment of folie à deux presents unique challenges that leave many psychiatrists perplexed. The traditional approach involves physically separating the two people, interrupting the cycle of mutual reinforcement of delusions. But this raises profound ethical questions. How do you separate two people who may be close family members or long-term spouses? How do you explain to them that their shared reality is, in fact, an illusion? In most documented cases, separation works almost magically. The secondary person, when removed from the primary inducer's influence, often begins to question their own beliefs within days or weeks. It's like waking up from a very vivid dream, initially confusing, then gradually clearer. How could I have believed that? Is a common question patients ask when they begin to recover. But the primary inducer presents a greater challenge. Their delusions usually persist even after separation because they originate from a more serious underlying psychiatric condition. Antipsychotics, cognitive behavioral therapy, and in some cases, prolonged hospitalization may be necessary. A particularly intriguing aspect of Folie à Deux is how it reveals the social nature of our perception of reality. We tend to think of reality as something objective, immutable, the same for everyone. But the truth is that our understanding of the world is profoundly influenced by the people around us. Families share not just genes and environments, but also ways of interpreting and making sense of experiences. When this social influence takes a pathological turn, the result can be devastating. Extreme cases of folie à deux include entire families convinced they're being persecuted, couples who abandon everything to flee imaginary threats, and even small groups that develop shared apocalyptic beliefs. In 2019, Australian researchers published a particularly disturbing case study in the Journal of Psychiatric Practice. A 45-year-old mother and her 22-year-old daughter simultaneously developed the conviction that microscopic parasites were invading their bodies through their skin. Both began scratching compulsively, even causing serious wounds. They kept small fragments of skin and fabric fibers in jars, convinced they were evidence of the parasites. Extensive medical examinations revealed no actual infestation, but mother and daughter mutually reinforced their beliefs, comparing specimens and developing elaborate theories about how the parasites reproduced and spread. The case was only resolved when the daughter was separately hospitalized and began antipsychotic treatment. This brings us to a profound philosophical question. If two people share exactly the same perception of reality, even if that perception is technically incorrect, who can say they are wrong? It's a question that challenges our fundamental understanding of truth, reality, and human experience. Folie à deux also forces us to confront our own mental vulnerability. All of us are influenced by people close to us. Their opinions, fears, and perceptions gradually infiltrate our own thought processes. Most of the time, this is healthy and normal. But under certain circumstances, extreme stress, social isolation, psychological vulnerability, this natural influence can become something much more sinister. Statistics show that folie à deux is relatively rare, affecting approximately 1.7 to 2.6 people per 100,000 inhabitants annually. But some specialists suspect the real number may be higher, especially considering cases that never come to medical attention because the individuals involved don't seek help or are misdiagnosed. The phenomenon also seems to be evolving with modern times. Researchers have begun documenting cases of folie à deux that develop through digital communication, couples living geographically apart but maintaining constant contact through messages, video calls, and social media. Technology, paradoxically, can both isolate and connect people in ways that facilitate the development of distorted, shared realities. During the COVID-19 pandemic, psychiatric hospitals reported a concerning increase in folie à deux cases, particularly among couples and family members who spent prolonged periods in isolation together. Confinement, combined with elevated anxiety and constant exposure to conflicting information about health and safety, created ideal conditions for the development of shared delusions. A specific case, reported by a Chicago hospital, involved a couple who developed the conviction that healthcare professionals were deliberately spreading the virus to control the population. They stopped seeking medical care for serious chronic conditions and tried to convince other family members of their theories. The case only came to medical attention when the man suffered a heart attack and his wife initially refused to call an ambulance. Modern treatments for folie à deux are becoming more sophisticated and compassionate. Instead of simply separating the people involved, many psychiatrists now prefer a gradual approach that includes family therapy, mental health education, and carefully adjusted medication. The goal is to preserve important relationships while helping individuals recover a clearer perception of reality. Cognitive behavioral therapy has proven particularly effective. Techniques that help patients identify and question distorted thoughts can break the cycle of mutual reinforcement that feeds shared delusions. Some clinics also experiment with virtual reality therapy, allowing patients to test their distorted perceptions in controlled and safe environments. Prevention, however, remains the biggest challenge. How do you identify people at risk before they develop folie à deux? Warning signs include increasing social isolation, especially when two people become increasingly dependent on each other for emotional validation. Sudden changes in behavior, growing paranoia about the outside world, and development of increasingly elaborate explanations for everyday events can also indicate the beginning of the process. Close family members and friends play a crucial role in early identification. They frequently notice when two people begin behaving strangely or developing irrational concerns that feed off each other. Early intervention, which may include family therapy or individual counseling, can prevent full progression to folie à deux. Research continues to reveal new aspects of this fascinating and disturbing phenomenon. Genetic studies suggest there may be hereditary components that make some people more susceptible to developing psychotic symptoms, either individually or together with other close people. Gut microbiome research is also exploring how digestive bacteria might influence mood and perception, potentially contributing to the development of shared symptoms in people who live together and share similar environments. Cultural aspects of folie à deux are also receiving more attention. The phenomenon seems to manifest differently in different cultures, reflecting specific fears and concerns of each society. In more collectivist cultures, shared delusions may involve family and community themes. In more individualistic societies, themes frequently revolve around personal persecution or government conspiracy. This brings us back to the fundamental question about the nature of reality and human experience. Folie à deux shows us that our perception of the world isn't as solid as we'd like to believe. We are profoundly social beings, and our understanding of reality is constantly shaped by the people around us. Most of the time, this helps us navigate the world effectively. But when this natural process goes off track, the result can be devastating. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of folie à deux is how it reveals the fragility of our own mental sanity. All of us depend on other people to validate our perceptions and experiences. When this validation becomes distorted, when two minds meet in territory of fantasy and fear, they can create together an alternative reality so convincing that it defies any external attempt at correction. It's a humbling reminder that the line between sanity and madness may be thinner than we'd like to admit, and that sometimes we're not alone when we cross that line. We take with us those we love most on a shared journey to territories that only our minds can map. Folie à deux remains one of modern psychiatry's most intriguing phenomena, a mystery that reveals as much about the nature of human connection as it does about the fragility of the individual mind. It's a reminder that, in the end, our reality is much more malleable and much more dependent on others than we'd like to believe. If this video made you reflect on the nature of reality and human connection, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content about the mysteries of the human mind. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you know someone who went through something similar? How do you think you would react in such a situation? And don't forget to share this video with someone else who's interested in these fascinating psychological phenomena. Important notice. This content is purely educational and should not be used for self-diagnosis. If you or someone you know is facing symptoms of mental health problems, seek qualified professional help. Mental health is serious and deserves specialized attention.